Hi, John Spark here from Travel with Purpose, and I'm really excited to be able to offer you this unique trip. Right now it's exclusive to us, or when I say us, the Magellan Network. So if you're really keen on South America, it's a place that's on your list, your bucket list, somewhere you want to go, then you're probably not going to find much better people to go with than Andrew Denton and Jennifer Byrne. They're not the trip, but they're going to make a little bit of a difference to it, I can promise you, based on their past experience and their past successes, 5 and 6 trips respectively. What I've done here is put together a special webinar using the director and founder of Chimu Adventures. Chad Carie is going to explain to you about 15, 16 different things. I've got them all listed here. I'm not going to read them out. They're time coded down here, everything from a map of where you're going, type of clothing to wear, the wildlife, and of course right at the end we're going to cover things like your current deals. Yes, there's actually a couple of good deals that you can capitalize on right now and save some money if you're quick. About 20 people are booked at this point, 30th of August, and there's only 112 you're able to go, so if you want to capitalize on this, you must move quick. The last thing we're going to do is give you a downloadable fact sheet on the Sea Adventurer. That'll be your home on the ice. I'm going to share the airlines that are currently flying and that we know will be flying over to South America direct out of Australia February next year, or January most people will be going, and also let you know that you can't really book anything until about March. So don't even waste your time looking. Even frequent flyer points, you could possibly go ahead and look at those, but the rest of it, you won't get anything that will make any sense to you. So no point worrying about that. I would urge you to consider also a pre and post. It's a long flight. I've been there a couple of times and I can assure you there's a lot to see. So maybe the first thing you want to do, get your cabin, and then after that we can work through with you on the options that are available. Okay, that's it. I'm going to turn this over to Chad Carie now. Enjoy, and please ask any questions you like at the end of this presentation directly by email. I look forward to it. Thank you.
So, leading into Antarctica, I just want to quickly give just a brief look at Antarctica and what you can do, because for most people, I guess, don't really know how the trips work exactly. And on this map, you can see there I've got 3 points that I've highlighted with stars. One's in Invercargill in New Zealand, and Tasmania could be on there as well, because some trips in the past have left out of Tasmania, not so much at the moment. And then you've got Punta Arenas in Chile, and Ushuaia down in Argentina. So they're all the options. You can see there that there are trips that, as I say, go from New Zealand to Australia. It's about 3 times the distance to Antarctica from Australia and New Zealand as it is from Argentina. So that's why the costs for those sorts of trips out of Australia and New Zealand are so expensive. They're more than double the price out of, say, Argentina or Chile. So for some people, it might seem a bit strange that we're leaving from Argentina for an Antarctica trip when Antarctica is so close to Australia. But that's really the main reason why. Even after flying over there, it's still significantly cheaper to do the trip, and obviously better for the environment too, because we use a lot less fuel and things like that. So in terms of getting over to Ushuaia, which is the departure point for this cruise, basically you fly over to Santiago. There's flights on both land and Qantas that fly over to Santiago. You connect through to Buenos Aires in Argentina, which is just a short little flight over the Andes, and from there it's about a 3.5-hour flight down to Ushuaia, which is the most southern city in the world, and is really the main departure point for Antarctica trips. Quick map as well to give you an idea of the itinerary roughly. You take that Drake Passage. Now everyone here's, as you're saying, everyone's worried about, say, the 15-meter swells and these things that you hear about, and they can be quite rough and people do get seasick, but I guess the misconception a lot of people have is that they're these huge 15-meter swells that go up and down very quickly. They're not. When you've got a 15-meter swell, the wavelength is huge. You're talking hundreds of meters. So it is a gradual up and down over that sort of height. But if you look at the sea, you won't, to your eye, well, to my eye anyway, you won't necessarily feel like it's 15 meters because it's such a huge wavelength between them. But that's not to say that people don't get seasick. They definitely do. and I definitely recommend getting some drugs prescribed from your doctor for that sort of thing if you suffer from seasickness, because it does help a lot. I would say though that generally it's the first couple of days that are the worst as you get your sea legs. Generally by the end of the trip on the Drake Passage on the way back, people are a lot better and feeling quite okay with it, even in the larger swells. But this just gives you a rough idea. You come down generally across the Drake Passage through the South Shetland Islands, and then through the Galash Strait, which is, you can see there's Deception Island on that map, which is the place I was talking about before. Galash Strait's the yellow line goes through there. It's a very sheltered strait, so that's a great area to view some of the islands, and a lot of wildlife. There's a lot of wildlife in there, and because it's quite protected, you usually get quite good weather in there. Clear sort of shameless plug for us. We're Australian company. We've got our own operations offices over in Latin America. We're Australia's largest Antarctica wholesaler. We actually started selling Latin America and have grown. Antarctica was more an add-on, but Antarctica is now such a huge part of our business. We're a member of IATA. We're only one of 2 Australian companies that are members of IATA, which is the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators. And we have a very strong focus on sustainability and giving back. We've financed over I think 500 microfinance projects, which is basically helping underprivileged peoples in Latin America, get their own, get a handout a hand up rather than a handout, and helping them to finance their, small business projects over in Latin America. We do a lot of fundraising, such as things like this, and charitable projects, such as at the moment, just last week we launched a project into saving sections of the Amazon rainforest and things like that as well. So that's a very strong focus of what we do, and has been since day one when we were founded about 10 years ago. Antarctica cruising and what small ship expedition cruising is. I guess a lot of people are familiar with the large traditional cruise ships, and this isn't really that sort of product. Most of the vessels, well, just about all the vessels that go down there, are expeditious by nature. So they're smaller vessels, they're more nimble. They can get into the small nooks and crannies of the Antarctic continent, the fjords, and get close to the glaciers and things like that. They've got ice-strengthened hulls, obviously, not generally icebreakers. That's what, is one of our most common questions. Icebreakers aren't actually that great as a tourist ship because they've got a flat bottom hull. But they're usually Class 1A ice-strengthened hulls, which is about the best you can get after an icebreaker. They're also a lot smaller generally with these sorts of expeditions. You're going out on Zodiacs every day. To get the most of those Zodiac experiences for the passengers, you really need to limit your numbers to sort of the biggest ships are about 150 people. Anything above that, you're really not getting the most of getting ashore. So that's why you don't see the big ship cruises down there. Also because there's in recent years been some new regulations in terms of fuel and things like that. The heavy fuel which the big ships use means they're not allowed down there because if there's any trouble with them, can cause huge environmental damage. So just a quick idea of what you do in Antarctica. It's another common question we have is what do you actually do? Well, here's a common day. Typical day. Although to say typical is a bit meaningless really, because every day really depends on weather, location, a number of factors which determine what you might do on that day. But generally, you get up reasonably early, have a breakfast, go out on your first shore excursion early in the morning, come back on board late morning, have a lunch. During that time, what are you having lunch? The ship will generally move an hour or two away to another location nearby. You'll then disembark after a lecture or something like that for your afternoon excursion. Late afternoon, come back on board and do your dinner. Then overnight, you'll travel then a full night sailing away to another location. Not always a full night sailing, but generally try and get as far away as possible just to break up as many different locations as possible. So you really try to fit in as much as possible during this single day. Zodiac Excursions is just give you an idea of what a Zodiac is. And these little rubber boats that get ashore, and most of the landings are wet landings, something like this. So the Zodiac will pull up to a small outcrop of rocks, or in some cases just a piece of ice, an ice floe, and you then you have sort of quite high gumboots on, and you'll just put your feet over the front of the Zodiac, and generally get a little bit splashed as you get out, but there's nothing generally the landing sites are reasonably safe. And then from there you just step up onto the rocks and you're usually almost straight amongst the wildlife. And here's a great example, even just driving around in the Zodiacs. I mean, everyone's always really keen to get ashore, but sometimes the best wildlife is actually seen just cruising around the ice on the Zodiacs. And the icebergs themselves, just cruising around close to the icebergs is quite fascinating, I think. But you really get there's so many whales down there. Things like, you quite often cruising around the ice, you'll get close to a lot of seals. Leopard seals in particular, which you won't see as much, say, on the land itself. And leopard seals are, really sort of the line, the sort of top of the food chain down in Antarctica. So for many people, that's sort of quite a highlight to be able to see a leopard seal.
Chad?
Yes.
Just with regard to the equipment, like the clothing, like you were saying, that getting off the boat, etc. Does the ship provide the clothing and the boots, or is it something that people have to be aware of taking?
The boots are always included, and the main reason for that is that people aren't allowed to bring their own boots because it may come from a farm or something like that, and they may have seeds or something in there which could pollute the local environment. So for that reason, you have to use the boots on board. With the other clothing, the jackets and the pants, they're not provided. Jackets are some things that some cruises include. We made the decision on these cruises. I guess it's an additional expense to the trip and therefore less money to raise for the foundation. And we've found in our previous experience, not everybody, but a good chunk of people already have ski jackets and things like that, which can essentially be used for this sort of trip. So to give away a jacket in that situation was a decision that we made. But even if you don't have ski gear, I mean, yeah, ski gear generally works. You can hire it in a Schwei for quite a minimal charge anyway, which is what a lot of people do anyway, even if they have the gear sometimes, because then if you're traveling around, say, Latin America before or after, you don't have to carry it with you.
And what temperatures would we be expecting to experience?
I mean, look, you can get down to, say, -20 if you were stuck in a storm, or I mean, you could definitely get lower, especially as is the start or the end towards the start of the end of the season. But generally, you're not going to be going outside, and the ship wouldn't let you ashore if there was a risk of a reasonably sized storm. So, when you're outside, quite often, especially if it's a nice clear day, it can be around 0 degrees. I've been outside on the deck quite a few times just in a t-shirt. It's usually the wind that's the killer. So it just depends on the wind speed because they roll down off the glaciers and things like that, and they can cut right through. So yeah, more so. I mean, the warm layers are important, but the most important thing really is that strong windproof layer, especially for your torso, the jacket, but also for your legs as well. Having a windproof layer on that exterior is really quite key. So just wanted here to show just a quick example of shore excursions. This is an old whaling station at Deception Island, which is quite a famous island down in Antarctica. It's actually the old caldera of an old volcano. Oh, it's still an active volcano, or possibly dormant. Sorry. But one little portion of that caldera has been eaten away, and you can actually drive a ship into the center of the caldera, which is water, obviously, because it has that entranceway. And the whole surrounding area, there's the whaling station there and a couple of research bases which you can visit, which make it very interesting. A lot of these stations, were just left abandoned, 100 years ago or more, and obviously everything that was left behind is slowly breaking up, but it's quite fascinating because it's quite a view back into some of our history, the sort of things you'd never be able to see, say, in anywhere in the developed world, because it would have been pillaged or taken away by now, obviously. So those sort of whaling stations and research bases are fascinating. Obviously, getting to just hang out with the penguins in the penguin colonies is quite an experience, and for most people you can sit there for hours and quite happily, and it's amazing fun. And there's things like the penguin highways, which are essentially little trails that the penguins follow rather religiously, and they will really wear a track through the ice even to the point where. But that's a very typical scene of what you'd see at a penguin colony, and not always, but some of the penguin colonies can be hundreds of thousands of birds. So for me it's I haven't been to anywhere else in the world where you can really see that sort of mass of living things of that size, other than say humans. And it really does feel like a city almost when you're in some of these penguin colonies, which is quite a unique experience. And the great thing is they're not scared of you, so you can sit down and the penguins you're not allowed to approach within a couple of meters of them, but they can walk straight up to you, and they quite often will. They won't try to attack you or anything like that. They're quite peaceful, but it's it's quite fascinating to see them so inquisitive. Just give you an idea of you don't always just do the wildlife. You'll quite often do a little a trek, even up to sometimes the small hills if you want to. They usually will have an active option and a not so active option, so it's up to people what they do. But sometimes even walking up a small hill that might only be couple of hundred meters, and you get a great view of the bay. Is quite a spectacular sight, and you get some great panoramic photos. Now this here actually shows it's an elephant seal and some king penguins in the background, which you're not very likely to see on the peninsula on this sort of trip because they're more in the sub-Antarctic islands. But the elephant seals, yes, you'll a good chance of seeing, and they are very impressive creatures just from their mass and their rather ugly-looking faces as well, quite striking. So yeah, it just gives you a quick idea. You've got the elephant seals, which have the large nose. You've got the fur seals. You've got the Weddell seals. You've got crab-eater seals. There's a lot of them. There's also the leopard seals, which are predators, will eat penguins and things like that, and they're much larger than larger than most of the seals. Not say the elephant seals, which are very large, but very large. The ones that there's a wide variety of whales. Fin whales are very common to see down there, and fin whales are quite impressive because they're the second largest whale after a blue whale. And when you look at a diagram of a fin whale versus a blue whale, they're not actually that much smaller. So they're very impressive animals. But you obviously get lots of humpbacks, southern right whales, orcas. So there's huge amounts of whales down there. In terms of the bird life, you've got the skuas, which you may have seen on some of David Attenborough's documentaries recently. The wandering albatrosses, which have the world's largest wingspan, which is the bird down on the bottom right. Snowy sheepbills, which is the one on the top left, which I think is one of the most beautiful looking birds you'll ever see. And birds like the Arctic terns as well, which actually fly all the way from the Arctic to Antarctica every year, which is the bottom left bird. So there's a lot of great bird life there, and then there's the penguins. And on the peninsula, these are the penguins that you would see. So you see the macaroni penguins, which are the ones with the yellow golden crest, which you may recognise from Happy Feet. We've got the gentoo penguins, which have the orange beak. The chinstrap penguin, which should be pretty self-explanatory, and then the Adelie penguin, which is the bottom. I've just got a bit here about the expedition crew because they really do make the trip. And I, having been on the ship, and I know quite a few of the expedition crew on the ship, I can only say how professional they are. I've been on about 12 ships myself, and this crew is second to none on the ship, and they really do make the experience. Their knowledge adds so much to your experience. The open bridge policy on the ship is fantastic too, because you can go up to the bridge at any time and see what the officers are doing. Look at all the navigational gear and things like that. And then I just mentioned here quickly, obviously you guys know that we obviously do everything through Latin America as well. And so there's, for a lot of people, same with our trip last year for Mawson's Heart, I think more than 50% of people ended up doing quite a bit of a trip around Latin America because you fly all the way over there. So it's well worth thinking about trying to make the most of your time and doing something like that as well.
Hi, it's John back again, and great to see you made it this far. You obviously got some interest in the ice and what's available down there. I want to now let you know what you need to do. If you haven't already, go onto our website. The address is right here. Check it out. We've got everything on there, from the itinerary to the fact sheets that download so you can see what it's all about. You don't really need to go anywhere else. And then of course, if you're interested in having some booking a cabin, then please give us a call on the number here, 1-800-130-635, and let's see if we can lock in exactly what you're looking for in terms of your cabin choices. Can't promise it because it's best in, best dressed. Only 112 going, already 20 plus booked. Now, the last thing, of course, after that is, once you've done that, we can then look at customizing your pre and post. Most people will do Patagonia. It's just what they do. If you haven't been there, I shouldn't really use it that way, should I? I don't mean do Patagonia. Go to Patagonia and you can spend about a week there. We're actually sending one of our team in October up to do the Lake Districts out of Santiago. So again, that's another thing that you can have a look at. We'll have some first-hand advice on that when you come back. In the meantime, if you've got any questions, please call us and we'll be happy to help in any way. Thank you very much.